Okay, the first thing is we just want to remind everyone that when you call, we do have a direct number that will ring just the three of us on the fiscal team. And well, it's in your documentation that we sent you, Brett. And then if you email fiscal@laca.org, that will create the help desk ticket. And we do advise that you don't email us specifically, because I am bad about when I'm in meetings or on vacation. Now, if I'm on vacation more than a half day, I'm pretty good about putting my out of office on. But if it's only a half day, I may not put my out of office on. And so you may send me a message and Kelly may be going, why hasn't she responded to my message? And I'm out having fun. So that way you aren't waiting for a response. If you post the help desk ticket, any one of the three of us will be able to pick it up and be able to respond to your ticket. Forms distribution. We reviewed the SLA, and the SLA actually covers the fact that in the SLA, you're saying you give us permission to file whatever forms that we need to file if you're on Classic. If you're on redesign, then provided you have applied for your TCC to file the 1099s and created your business service online account for W-2s, then you will be doing your own submission of W-2s and 1099s. So we realized that, you know, it's in the SLA. We don't need a second form to authorize us to send information that's you've already signed off when you signed our contract. The redesign W-2 PDF files, in the past, we have put these on CDs so that your district would have a copy of the W-2s. Well, in redesign, if you go to Utilities File Archive, there is a W-2 tab. And after I create all of your print files for W-2s, I take that zip file and I upload that into the redesign file archive. That serves two purposes. You can always go there and get the W-2s that you need, and it pulls into Kiosk so that your employees, when they log in Kiosk and they click on the W-2s, then they can retrieve their W-2s from Kiosk. So because of that, we don't need to do the CDs for the districts that are on redesign to give them another copy of the W-2s. For 1099s, they are also archived, and that's really better than what it has been in the past, because in the past it's like, oh yeah, we got to remember to copy that 1099 file onto the CD. And so we have prior year information out in Bear, but we also put everything, because we wanted it to be able to be accessible for Kiosk for the W-2s, into redesign. So there's no reason to do the redundancy there. And because it's in the SLA, then we don't need to have those additional sign-offs. Are there any questions about any of this or anything that you wanted to add, Carrie? Okay, Our next upcoming meetings, we will have the lab available this afternoon if anyone wants to come up in person. And we will be on Zoom from 1 to 2. If anyone wants to connect online to have any questions answered about calendar year-end balancing. Today is primarily focusing on the accounting side because that's what we're talking about today. We will have that available. We're doing a redesign advanced reports training on December 14th. If you are interested, we'll have Zoom option. We are having Zoom option available in addition to in-person. Please sign up on our webpage on the event calendar if you're interested in coming. We have the Wave 9 kickoff on December 15th, which will be Zoom. And then we have the redesign live status call, which is also a Zoom call because it usually doesn't last more than an hour, on January 20th. We're going to do the redesign Wave 9 training. It is right now scheduled for January 25th through the 27th. And then our next 2 fiscal advisory meetings are scheduled for March 17th and June 2nd. And June 2nd, we will go over the fiscal year-end procedures for accounting. Any questions about any of the meetings that we have coming up? Treasure retreat. Do we have anyone who wants to head up the Treasures Retreat for 22 and a location? Julie wants to do 23 because that's when Hocking Hills will be in its glory and have their new lodge. But if you want a Treasures Retreat in 22, we need someone to step forward to say, yeah, I'll head it up and I'll do all the legwork and finding a location and be the local host and work on the agenda and get the topics and everything together. So if someone wants to step forward, please do so. Our Treasures Retreats in the past have been a Thursday and a Friday or a 2-day, not necessarily Thursday and Friday, but 2-day where we have some sessions in the morning, maybe early afternoon, and then some playtime. And then we all meet for dinner, and then we have some sessions the next day and end around lunchtime. So if we want to do just a 1 day with no overnight, that's probably, it's whatever. Those of you online did not see Julie's face, but she gave the classic response of, yeah, that's not the ideal preferred interpretation of a retreat. Okay. So if someone wants to volunteer to head up the retreat, please let us know, and we'll work with you what we can, but this is for you, so it is topics you guys would be interested in, and LACA can supplement some things, but it's not meant for LACA to do everything. So on to our next hot topic. I'm sure you're all aware that minimum wage for Ohio is increasing on January 1st from $8.80 to $9.30. And there are posters available. Now everybody's favorite topic, EMIS. Thank you all for getting your 5-year forecast submitted on time. Everybody did make the deadline. In fact, everybody had it submitted before Thanksgiving. So that was great. The forecast submission collection is open again, so that if you do have changes to your forecast and it's substantial to where you feel you need to resubmit to the state prior to the mandatory resubmission that opens April 1st, you can go ahead and submit again. The FY22 student collection is open. Originally, they were going to take FY22 numbers for your December #1 payment and have the new funding formula massaged and ready to go for December. Well, in trying to get all of the numbers and all of the formulas and everything the way that it's supposed to be according to the law, they are pushing that date back to January. So I believe they're taking the final numbers from the close of the first student collection on December 20th and using that for your January #1 payments. And so the January payments will be based on FY22 numbers. Now, even though they are not funding based on the new formula yet, everything will be adjusted for the remainder of the year when they start funding on the new formula so that you will not lose any money. It's not going to be half the year you're getting old numbers and the rest of the year you're getting the new formula. They will go back to July and adjust back to July 1 based on the new formula. So rest assured, districts will not lose out on the new funding formula base. Along with the close of the first collection on December 20th is the federal child count. And this is a report of all of your students who are identified with a disability and served under an IEP as of October 31st. And so we had a training on Monday on how to interpret the federal child count report and troubleshooting it. And your EMIS coordinators and special ed people should be working together to make sure that all of their issues are corrected and that they have verified all of their students with disability and everything's being reported the way that they should be. Also in this collection, the casino monies are distributed based on the numbers from this enrollment as of the Friday of the first full week of October. And then the money will be distributed in January. The staff collection is open. All of the statistics that go on your local report card for certification, licensure, experience, the percent of classes taught by certificated personnel, the percent of inexperienced teachers that have 5 or less years experience, the percent of teachers that have a master's degree, that have a bachelor's degree, et cetera, et cetera. All of that comes from the first staff course collection. So it is very important that you are verifying that your district is verifying those staff reports. The teacher license or course report, which will show if individuals are certified to teach the courses they're teaching, is currently available. And we're doing a training on that report. It's not scheduled yet, but it will be the first or second week of January. And If you have questions about reading, interpreting any of the reports, the one thing I do want to remind redesign districts is that they are verifying their data closely and maybe doing pivot tables on their staff employment record to verify their counts, because if you do not have all of the, let me rephrase that. If you have compensation records, if you have a position that has more than one compensation record on it, and all of those compensation records are marked as yes to report to EMIS, then that person could be counted as 2 or 3 FTE, because each of those compensation records will be submitted rather than just 1 FTE. Why doesn't that show up as an error? Well, it does if they exceed 2 FTE, but if they only have 2 compensation records that show them as 2 FTE, that won't kick out as an error. So it is very important that you are verifying all of your numbers, especially as districts migrate to the redesign, so that they are looking at their number of staff and that you aren't reporting that you have 300 teachers when you only have 150 teachers. There are also College Credit Plus and tuition reports that you guys can use to balance back to your foundation statements of deducts that were done. And those are in the data collector under reports, level 2 reports. Are there any questions about any of the EMIS stuff I just went over? The question is the EMIS Alliance troubleshooting the teacher licensure course report. Is that intended for EMIS coordinators, treasurers, payroll people? It is, most of the EMIS Alliance trainings are geared toward EMIS coordinators, but they are more than welcome to bring the payroll person or curriculum or treasurer, whoever is responsible for the staff data, to verify that John Doe is certified to teach the biology class. And well, why are they kicking out? Well, it's because they have a high school chemistry certification and not a biology certification, or, you know, so it's up to the district. We do recommend the EMIS coordinator comes, but we also encourage, if they want to bring someone with them that may know the content of the data. Okay. There's no more questions for me. I think Jake is going to go through current fiscal projects.
Okay, we are going to start out with a brief RAM update. There has not been anything necessarily new for RAM, but we did want to remind the classic districts of the known bug where RAM is not updating requisitions properly, that have had a line deleted. But if anyone has anything new that they've experienced with RAM that they would like to ask, you can take this time or let us know through email. But there really isn't much as far as a RAM update at this point. Employee kiosk, we wanted to remind you that the timesheet module is available. If anybody is interested in a demo for that, just let us know. We can arrange, you know, a timesheet module demo. I don't think anyone has taken us up on getting that installed, so we could work with you on getting that installed if you're interested. There is a kiosk release coming any day now. It's a pretty large release. We've talked about that at previous you know, payroll meetings, but if you have any questions on that, let us know. But when that release is completed, we will send out an email kind of letting you all know what changes have occurred, just as a reminder on that as well. Don't know if anybody from eFinance Plus is you know, watching on Zoom, but if you are, we will be in contact regarding an IPI-DIPI replacement because your current IPI-DIPI model will be leaving after 2022. So we'll be working with you at some point in the upcoming months on a replacement for that. Redesign update. We just kind of wanted to give you a kind of a year in review to let you know that there are now over 600 districts using redesign. So, you know, anything you're going through, there's 600 other districts that are going through it too. So, so just kind of wanted to show you that update. Wave 8, all of those districts are now live and doing very well from what we're seeing. Wave 9, we will have a kickoff meeting next week for the 4 LACA districts that will be the 4 remaining LACA districts that will be moving to redesign, followed by a training in late January. And then the parallels, we'll talk to you guys about that at the kickoff meeting on what dates we kind of you know, want to set for paralleling your data entry for that. Those districts, CTEC, Maysville, Northridge, and Tri-Valley. You know, as I said, we'll talk to you guys next week on a schedule for your parallels. You'll notice 2 other districts, Black River and Triway, will be added to this wave. Those are from another ITC that we're helping out through their migrations as well. We wanted to send out a reminder. We have moved a few of the districts already from LACA server to a management council server for the redesign. And there are some advantages to doing this, which we've discussed in the past, but we just wanted to send out a reminder that we still have a couple districts remaining, and we'll be in contact with you on a good time to try to get this scheduled. If you have any questions, please let us know. If you have a certain time when your district will, you know, have some downtime, it takes us about a couple hours to get everything moved over. And really the only thing that would change would be your district's URL for, you know, what website you'll be logging into. We'll have you, you know, talk to your third-party vendors, but there's very little that that you'll have to do. It's mostly something that takes us a couple hours to change for you. So we'll be talking to those couple districts about that. The new workflows module. On the accounting side, the requisition approval workflows, no one has really contacted us yet about you know, getting started on that. But if you are interested in seeing more, or if you have any questions, if you want to try it out, you know, we could you know, get something started. You know, if you wanted to try that out as maybe like a RAM replacement, or if you don't have any type of requisition approval module at all, it's something you could try out. You know, for your districts, just let us know. We can set something up on that. employee onboarding, there are several districts that have requested that to be installed. So, you know, if you haven't already reached out, let us know and we can try to get that installed for you as well. Equipment inventory is something else that's also kind of new that has moved to the redesign. We have started moving Johnstown's data over. They've kind of volunteered. We have struggled a little bit with that, and there are some issues with the data transition from classic to redesign. So we're kind of working through that. And once we have that, you know, resolved, you know, we will, you know, work with them on getting things balanced and up and running and trained. And then we'll contact the rest of the districts as well to get that information, you know, data moved over. So. As far as EIS migration, we want to make sure that FY21 is closed before, you know, we go to do that. So we just wanted to kind of remind you of a couple of things you could do now in anticipation of, you know, moving to the new equipment inventory module. Another thing would be to clean out the pending file and then review the maintenance information fields because they do not import into redesign. So if you have anything in those, you want to take note of that as well. Which I don't think many of our districts, if any, have any information in those screens. Any questions on any of the fiscal projects or anything in general?
Can you go back to the kiosk if you give me, said there was one away in 2022?
Yes, for the classic or for the EFP districts. Because right now they currently have like a classic instance that they use to kind of help make that work. But for any of the redesign districts, it's going to keep going the same way it's been going. So you're good to go. So I'm going to turn it over to Carrie. She's going to start talking about calendar year and closing.
Good morning. First, I just have a reminder on here from last year. Last year, if you remember, we had that new 1099 NEC form. So for all of your non-employee compensation, it went on that new form, and kind of less information remained to have to get reported on the 1099 miscellaneous. So the reminder that we want to talk through is to make sure you are thinking about this correctly, because we did notice a difference as we printed forms for districts. And where we definitely noticed a difference was with your attorneys and the gross proceeds portion. If you paid any gross proceeds to an attorney, is reportable on the 1099 miscellaneous, but your payments to an attorney for services, typical fees, that is reported on the 1099 non-employee compensation form. So that is one piece that we don't know that everybody interpreted correctly. So if you didn't pay gross proceeds and you have your attorney set up with a 1099 type of non-employee compensation, you're fine. But if you paid fees and gross proceeds, you have to have 2 vendor records for your attorneys in order to get this reported correctly on the 2 forms, because how you're designating which form is based on that 1099 type on the vendor record. So where you pick non-employee compensation or rents or other income or all those different types, or non-1099. So in theory, if you have gross proceeds and fees to an attorney, to the same attorney, you need 2 vendor records so you can designate the different types so it gets onto each form accurately. So that is definitely one thing we noticed. Some districts, as we were printing out forms, we saw attorneys, just on maybe the miscellaneous. And we're thinking, did you really pay that much in gross proceeds? Or did you just pick attorney, even though it said attorney gross proceeds? So as we walk through this calendar year end closing checklist, make a mental note that that might be something you want to go back and check your vendor records on. Another thing that's been common recently, we've received a lot of questions from your payroll staff about deceased employees. And deceased employees will receive a W-2 and a 1099 this year if you paid them as the employee this year and paid them after they passed away. So when they get that 1099 this year, you need to make sure that the vendor record in accounting has been switched to a type of other income so that it ends up on the 1099 miscellaneous. You know, if you had that employee set up as non-1099 for their typical mileage reimbursement or something, that payment that you made after they passed away needs to be reported on a vendor set up as other income, probably not to that employee, probably to the estate of that employee or to the spouse. So you probably even need to make sure you've received like a W-9 or something to document that new vendor that you paid that to. So I do know that's happened in a lot of districts this year. So those are probably 2 tips before we jump into the checklist. Does anybody have questions about those?
Kind of about that. We had one pass away over the summer and cash that check. That plan is to still report it.
So even though somebody hasn't cashed it, I would think you would still consider that paid. I would agree with that. And if anybody didn't hear that on Zoom, if an employee passed away and they haven't, that family hasn't cashed that payment to the estate, you know, for a while, I would probably still get that on the 1099 this year because it's when you paid it. So both of these forms, you need to make sure you furnish by January 31st. Really, it's just you need to make sure your vendors are set up correctly. If your vendors are set up correctly, it's going to end up on the right form. We're going to print both forms to you and hand them to you. So then in the PowerPoint, we have links to your checklists, and I sent those out with the meeting documentation. So hopefully everybody has those printed. And you should be seeing those on the screen now. So the first portion of each checklist, I have classic on the left, redesign on the right. The first portion is just like that actual check sheet that you can use as you go through the process if you like that condensed checklist. And then if I scroll down to the actual information portion of the checklist, that's where we will start today. So the first step, and these steps kind of coincide, there's a couple steps you'll see where we just have a placeholder on classic or a placeholder on redesign, maybe just as, you know, so we can teach side by side, so we can keep them the same. But so the first step is to review those 1099 reporting requirements. So the requirements that we just talked about, or if you need more information, we have a document on the LACA website that explains the 1099 miscellaneous and the 1099 NEC. We also have a document on the website for the deceased employee payment, because your payroll person is doing a portion of that, but you are doing a portion of that in accounting as well. There may be times that you need to look at the IRS instructions, but regardless, just make sure you review those vendor records and make sure they're set up as you would expect. Okay, so the next step is to validate your vendor records and make sure you have that TIN type selected for all of them. So this was new, you know, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. So we're probably used to this, but I know especially in Classic, as your accounts payable person is probably setting up vendors, they may be doing that in USAS Web, and they might forget to go into reflections, vendor screen, and fill out, was this an SSN or EIN? So you may have some cleanup at this point in time to do. So just make sure that is filled out. And in redesign, you can run some filters in your grid that we have spelled out here to filter down to the appropriate vendors, and then click a report button and get that in Excel if you would like to look at it in Excel or in a PDF, or you can just look in your grid and review that and make sure that those are populated as they need to be. And in Classic, there's also a TIN match program that you can use to extract a file into a spreadsheet and then manually populate SSN versus EIN, or upload that file to the IRS TIN matching site to get them to populate SSN versus EIN. I think you probably commonly use that, when this was new. Right now, you're probably not doing that, but the instructions are there. If you're interested and need that this year. There is not an equivalently formatted file in redesign for the tin match upload option. So if you have a lot of vendors in redesign that are missing that SSN versus EIN flag, and if you want to use that IRS site to upload to and get the information back, then just contact us and we can work with you to get a file. I'm hoping that either Classic or redesign, you really just have a few vendors that you can manually populate, possibly quicker than even running through that process and uploading and getting information back. But if you need help with that, just let us know. And then a tip also in Classic to find out those vendors that might be missing the SSN or EIN, you could just go ahead and run F1099 and it will actually put error messages throughout the report that says this vendor is missing the SSN or EIN. So that might be a quick way to identify it. And in redesign, if you have that tax ID type on your grid, you would just see that it's blank. So that would be a very quick way in redesign to identify the same information. Okay, so once you have those tax ID types filled out, the next thing is to start reviewing the vendors that are actually set up to receive a 1099 and make sure that they're set up correctly, or review those vendors that are not going to be receiving a 1099 and make sure that that's correct, or do any of those vendors need to receive 1099s. So in order to do that, in Classic, you can use the Venn SSN program, and there are 3 options that you can run. So option 4 is going to look at all of those 1099 vendors that are meeting the year-to-date activity requirement of $600 or more at this point in time in the year. Or you can run option 6 to look at all of those vendors regardless of activity, because in the next month you might pay some more. Maybe you want to look at all of your vendors, but review those 2 options and make sure those, all the vendor information is correct, all the vendor information is complete. And yes, those vendors deserve a 1099. And in redesign, we have the grid filters here to replicate the same information in your grids, or if you click the report button, to have the same information on a PDF report or in an Excel report, so that you can get those same lists of vendors and review the same information. And then the third option in Classic is option 5, to look at your non-1099 vendors who are being paid, $600 or more, and make sure that those vendors were set up correct. Are any of those vendors deserving of a 1099? If so, they were marked incorrectly, you can go correct them in vendor screen. And then in redesign, we have, go ahead and look for the ones that are marked non-1099. And if you find any of those that should be receiving 1099, edit the vendor record and select the appropriate 1099 type to get them set up correctly. Okay, and then from those reports, Venn SSN that we created in Classic, or from those grid reports that we created in redesign in the previous step, you can review the vendor names, addresses, and amounts and make sure those are correct. And additionally, in redesign, there's also another report that you may like, the SSDT 1099 vendor report. So if you don't like that grid report that you just created, you can go ahead and try that report from the report manager and review that same information. That 1099 vendor report from the redesign, it kind of groups the vendor records by the 1099 type. So especially in redesign, that's going to be a very easy way for you to pick out your attorneys. Like we talked about before this checklist, how did you mark your attorneys? You can go to that category that's attorney gross proceeds. Is that all of your attorney vendor records? Because if so, are you really paying them all gross proceeds? If that gross proceeds area is really large, I would question that. So as you're reviewing vendor names, remember that in Classic, you have those 2 name fields on the vendor record. You have the name and the second name. So you can have the 1099 information on the first name field, and then a doing business as on the second. name field, or you can have the name that everybody knows them by on the first. And if you want the second name to be the official 1099 name, you have to precede that by 1099:. So that stuff's probably already set up. And for those of you on redesign, that imports over. And we want to, if this is your first calendar year on redesign, we want to make sure you pay special attention to that, to make sure it did import over correctly. Like if you had a 1099 space colon or something and it didn't pick up and recognize that during the import, we just want you to pay special attention to those vendor names and make sure it's really the 1099 name that is showing on this report. And if something is incorrect, then in Classic, you go to the vendor screen and fix the name fields. In redesign, you're going to go to core vendors and you're going to scroll down to the locations area of the vendor screen. And there's those check boxes over to the right of the locations, which say, this is for my purchase order, this is for my check, this is for my 1099. So you just want to make sure the one that is check marked 1099 is the correct information for the 1099. So even if you had that not quite set up perfectly in Classic and maybe it didn't import over the way you expect, my guess is that all that information is down there in the locations. The checkboxes might just be wrong, you know. So if you're seeing something that you're questioning on any of these reports, look at that bottom part in redesign of your vendor screen. The last portion of that step 4 is talking about adjustments. So we were reviewing like vendor names and addresses, and that step also said to review vendor amounts. So are any of those amounts incorrect? Did you pay anything outside of accounting to a vendor that you need to get on the 1099? You know, maybe through an athletic checkbook, or do you see some incorrect amount because some prior year void or something crossed and messed up current year numbers? Whatever the case may be, if your numbers are incorrect on that report, in Classic, you can just go edit the year-to-date amount on the vendor. And in redesign, you would go view the vendor record. And after you view it, not edit it, after you view it, you will see a button at the top of the vendor record called vendor adjustments. And you would enter a positive or negative adjustment to get the year-to-date amount to be where it needs to be. Okay, step 5 is just to make sure you have W-9s on file for all of your vendors. And you know, some districts track that in user-defined fields in Classic or in custom fields in redesign. So if you're not, that's an option. We can definitely help you set up custom fields in redesign if you want to start tracking whether or not you have a W-9 on file, so that at this point in the year, you can feel confident that you do, and that'd be a really easy, you know, way to check. If you had that in a user-defined field in Classic, it would have imported over. So we just would have to like find that user-defined field in your grid and redesign and review it and make sure it came over. Or if you're still in Classic, you could use Safari to review if you have everything. And then we are ready to close the month. So enter all of your December transactions and do your bank reconciliation. Update your cash rec information if you use that. And then balancing with reports, step 8. So in Classic, run the PO detail for outstanding POs and compare that to your bow check. And also on your bow check, you want to review that and make sure all of the amounts for expended amounts for cash budget and appropriation are all the same, that nothing is out of sync there, and that your revenue amounts and cash, your received amounts for the revenue and cash accounts are all the same across there. And again, then the encumbered amount balances back to that PO detail. On the redesign side of things, you could run an outstanding PO detail if you want. There is no equivalent bow check report, so we don't talk about those couple balancing pieces on redesign, but it's because redesign is kind of calculating on the fly, and Classic had stored figures all kinds of places. So that was an extra step that you had to do in Classic to make sure everything was in sync. And there were times that it could get out of sync. And if you are out of sync in Classic, then there's the Fix ENC program that you run, and hopefully that fixes it all. And if not, you call us. So Then that last report listed there is the FinSum or the redesigned cash summary. And you're gonna run that and compare that to the FinDebt or the redesigned financial detail report. So that's why the redesign list is a little shorter on that step, which is nice. That's one less thing to worry about once you're on redesign. But balance all those reports, make sure they're all in balance. And then if your district uses SM2, go ahead and do SM2 calc. Or in redesign, it's the SSDT spending plan summary report in the report manager. And then step 10 is any additional custom reports or any additional reports that you run for your board members or for certain department heads or for your records. So in Classic, that could be the monthend.com and the MOEN procedure. So if you do that every month, this is just your step to do that. In redesign, if you need any reports like that, we can always work with you to set up custom report bundles. Or, maybe you just have a couple reports that you want to go run here right now. Then step 11 in Classic is to run BackBud to create all of those reports that get sent to Bear, and then log into Bear and make sure they are there and they look good. And redesign, you don't have to do anything at that step because your monthly reports are going to be created when you close the posting period. And if you looked at the website yesterday or today, the website says step 21 right there because Carrie missed a step number. So sorry about that. I have the live document updated. And then step 12 in Classic is to run adjust to close the month. You're just selecting the month end option, not the calendar year end option yet. And in redesign, that's just a placeholder because you're not going to close the month yet, because in redesign, you're going to close the month, which is going to close the year all at once. Classic has kind of two separate options, a month end and a calendar year end. So the next step 13 is to run Baumon and Classic or the SSDT monthly balance report from the report manager in redesign, and make sure you're comfortable with that. And then we are ready to close the calendar year. So there are a couple extra steps here on the redesign side because redesign districts are submitting their own 1099 information since it's created in your database. And instead of you having to securely get it to us, you can have that accountant just securely submit it, get your confirmation and be done. This actually will probably, even though it seems like an extra step to you, it'll actually make your life easier in the long run because we can't submit our files until we have everybody done. And so we're always waiting till like the end of January until everything is done. And there's one district maybe, struggling to get everything wrapped up and everybody's submission is held up. So there have been times when we haven't even submitted W-2s or 1099s and we have districts calling us saying, we have to write somebody a W-2C or, correct 1099 and it's not received yet. And we're like, yeah, it's not received yet because we can't do it yet. So you have to sit tight. That person can't have their W-2C yet. So even though this is an extra step in redesign, I think in the long run, it's better for everybody involved. And we are still here to help you through it if you have questions during the process. But so step 14 is an extra step for redesign districts just to go to system configuration. So on the menu, pick system, select configuration, and there's an IRS form 1099 submission configuration option. We want you to verify the information that is there. Make sure the box is checked that you are submitting your own file. If that box is not checked, it won't populate all the header information that needs to be on there. So make sure that that is checked. And then verify that your transmitter control code is entered in there correctly. Or if you are just getting that back from the IRS, go ahead and enter that. If anybody has not received that from the IRS at this point in time, if you go to this screen and that TCC is not entered and you don't know what that number should be, go ahead and send us an email or give us a call and we can give you a phone number that you can call the IRS at a certain phone number and tell you which options to pick. And you can talk to somebody and they can normally provide you with your TCC over the phone after they verify some information from you. So we did have at least one district this year who applied and then never got the letter saying you were approved, here's your TCC. So you could potentially be in the same boat. So if you go to this screen and don't have a TCC and don't know what to do, feel free to let us know, because I know you think calling the IRS is gonna be ugly, and there have been times that we've sat on the phone for a long time, but this one option normally gets you to somebody pretty quickly. So there's also a couple of new fields on this screen. There's going to be contact name, contact phone number, and contact email address. And that was not on the screen before, so that's going to be blank for everybody. So go ahead and fill that out. And what that's going to do is then take the information from this screen and populate it into the report as you're running the 1099 report. Otherwise, you always had to hand type that information in the report every time you ran it. So this is going to make your life easier if you enter it here. And then the next step is to create a test submission file, which for classic districts, LACA takes care of. We do one test submission file for all of the classic districts. But for redesign, especially if this is the first time you have submitted 1099s on your own, so this is your first year on redesign, you have to submit a test file in order to be approved for the combined filing, so that when you submit your 1099 information to the IRS, it also makes it to the state of Ohio. So if you do not submit a test file and get approved for the combined filing, you would have to submit to the IRS and then also submit to Ohio. So the IRS recommends you do the test file every year. So we have this step here and everybody can do it, but especially if you are first year on redesign, make sure you do this step. And it goes, we have all of these steps here spelled out here, so just pay attention. You know, it tells you, make sure you are selecting a type of test, make sure you're in the IRS format. We suggest you change the name of the file to add test to the end of it, because this is going to go in your file archive, and later you're going to look out there and be like, which 1099 file is this? Well, this one's my test one, this one's my real one. So just follow these steps. We have them all spelled out here for you. And then we also have the link here for you to go into the test fire IRS system. And you will have to create an account in that test fire system separately than your account in the actual live fire system. But I think it just asks for like your TCC, your transmitter control code, and your EIN. And I think getting that test login is pretty quick. So you'll go ahead and get that login and upload that test file. And then I think like a day and a half to 2 days later, you'll get an email that'll say your file was good or it was bad. If it was bad, you know, we give you the steps here. Here's where you can log in and look, and it'll tell you what's wrong with the file, but you can also call us because we've been through this too. We had bad test files last year a couple of times. So we've been there, we can help you through that. But what you're looking for is good federal state reporting. So we have this spelled out here. You don't want good federal reporting, you want federal and state reporting, because you want to be approved for both, for one submission to qualify for the IRS and the state of Ohio. So if you have questions on any of that process, we helped redesign districts through that last year, so just call and we will happily help. And then the next step for both classic districts and redesign districts is to start creating those actual 1099 submission and print files. So in classic, you're going to run F1099, and remember that there's no error report with that F1099 report. It's just all those errors are embedded right in F1099.txt. So scroll through that and make sure there are no error messages on there. And if there are, resolve those. And that's going to create your print file in classic and your submission file. And LACA will pick up your print file and print those, and take your submission file and add the necessary header information and get that submitted for you. And in redesign, the steps are here for you to create the XML file. That is your print file. And you know, so we tell you which options to select, make sure it doesn't say test anymore. And then we have the steps for you to create your tape file, which is your submission file. And then we have steps to create a PDF file to go to the file archive. So as you create these, you know, print files, submission files, and PDF files, they're all going to go to the file archive. And this PDF file is the one that Mary was talking about at the beginning of the meeting, where your 1099s are going to be in the file archive as a PDF, only if you run this option. So your file archive is getting populated as you do these steps. So just make sure you do all of these steps. There is a comment at the bottom of those steps that if you need more time to finish 1099s, let LACA know, and we can work with you so that you can move on in the month of January if you can't wrap up your 1099s now. But if you are done with your 1099s, go ahead and email LACA. And we would like everybody to be done with their 1099s by the Friday, January 14th. And then that will give us one entire week to make sure we have everything printed so that on Monday, January 24th, we can make sure at least by that date, we have 1099s printed and ready for you guys to come pick up and get to your vendors. And that'll give you an entire week to make sure you mail those or hand those out. So let us know that you're done with your 1099s and we will get them printed for both classic and redesigned districts. And we will also at that point in time run backups of your databases. So in classic, we will use that backup to create your change year calendar 21 database. And then we will call you back when that is completed. And in redesign, we will use that backup. We will preserve it here in case you call in a month or 3 months and you're, questioning something and we need to get back to that backup so we can look at it. So make sure that you call us for that backup and only move on when we tell you it's complete. And then step 19 is the workers' comp report. So if you still use that, I have heard some people don't use that anymore since all of that has changed. Maybe you do that differently. I guess some districts do, but the instructions are here for classic or redesign, the options that you have for generating that report. And then step 20 is to run the vendor new hire report. So hopefully your accounts payable person has been running the vendor new hire report all year long and reporting vendors to the state of Ohio as you're required whenever they meet that $2,500 threshold. This is your chance to check up on them and make sure they've been doing that. So if this vendor new hire report has vendors on it, ask your AP person, did you report these somehow? Or do all of these still need reported? They're only showing up on this report if the system thinks you have not reported them. So in theory, you are hoping for a blank report on step 20. If not, talk with your staff and call us with questions if you have questions on that. And then step 21 is a classic step, not a redesign step, but in classic, you then have to reset that vendor new hire information and change a vendor back to reportable from reported. So if they were reported this calendar year, they need to be reportable again for next year. And redesign, you don't have any official program you have to run because it's just smart enough to know, hey, the calendar year changed. I need to start reporting vendors again. And then step 22 is to close your calendar year in Classic using the adjust calendar year end option, and to close the month of December in redesign. So when you run adjust for calendar year in Classic, it's clearing a bunch of figures. When you close a posting period in redesign, this is going to close the month of December and close the calendar year, and it's going to spit off a ton of reports to your file archive, which you're used to from closing months now. So just go to your file archive, make sure your monthly reports are there, and make sure your calendar year end reports are there. And after those reports are populated, go ahead and open January. Maybe you already have January open if people are already keying, future requisitions or future purchase orders. If so, then you can just go make January current. But make sure January isn't made current until after those reports are in the file archive. Okay, so then you can move on and start entering January transactions. And we have some tips here in the redesign checklist just on running reports. So explaining the as of period query option on reports, or, when you might want to change your current period for certain reports to get month-to-date totals for a prior month. If you're looking back, you're in January and you want to see calendar year 21 information or December information at this point in time. So we just explained a bunch of that information in case this is new to you, in case you're still new to redesign. And we also put a plug in there for the file archive. Remember, all those reports went to the file archive. Maybe that's the easiest place for you to go if you're looking for prior month or prior year information. If for any reason you are reopening a month in redesign, just keep in mind that whenever you close that reopened month, it's going to spit off more reports to the file archive. Do you want those or not? Maybe you do. Maybe you want the snapshot of what the reports were when you initially closed, and you want the snapshot now based on changes you made. If you don't want two sets of reports, you should contact us before you reclose the reopened period. So if you don't want the new set of reports, we can disable the bundle so it doesn't send the reports. If you don't want the old reports, we have to delete them before you put new reports in there, because we can't pick and choose which reports we get rid of. We just can only delete the whole folder. So if you call us after and say, okay, I just reclosed, get rid of my first version, they're gonna be there for a while. You just have both. Which some treasurers are fine. If you especially are probably rarely reopening posting periods, some treasurers like the snapshot. If here's what it was, here's what it is, and that's not a problem. Okay. Step 24 is to validate your accounts and make sure that you don't have any invalid accounts at this point in time. So Classic, you can use the ValAct option to do that. And Redesign, you have the SSDT account validation report from the report manager. So take a look at that and make sure everything is cleaned up. And then go ahead and post any pending transactions. So in Classic, this is your auto post of future POs or your auto post of payroll. And in Redesign, that's your pending transactions for payroll. Redesign, you don't have to worry about future purchase orders because the Redesign just knows, okay, I'm in the right month now. This is not a future purchase order anymore. It's a current purchase order. Step 26, if you had previously asked for more time on your 1099s, this is just that reminder to get those wrapped up by January 14th. And then step 27 is to come visit us and pick up your printed copies of 1099s and W-2s. Step 28 is just a classic step for those districts who are using monthend.com in the MOEN procedure. And if you are looking at that document now on the LACA website, the January document that's out there right now is still for January 21. I updated the January 22 document, but I haven't put it on the website yet. So I should be able to do that later today. So if you printed that one, just go ahead and recycle it and print one later. And then there's no equivalent step in Redesign. But if you do need a custom set of reports, we can work with you to create a custom bundle so that when you close a month, you get additional reports above and beyond the file archive if you're interested in that. And then the extra step on the redesign checklist is to submit your 1099 information. So for classic districts, LACA is doing this step because we have to add a bunch of header information. The classic files are really not properly formatted for submission, but the redesign files are. So this just walks you through where you need to go to log into the IRS Fire account and all of those steps once you get into that website of how you actually submit it. And then what sort of, status you want that file to look like once you're done. And then a reminder, if you were not approved for the combined filing because of your test file, to make sure you get the information to Ohio. But if you were approved for the combined submission, then this step wouldn't apply. And then if you're required to submit 1099s to Rita, CCA, or any other city, this is just that reminder to do that. So, questions? I didn't pause very often and ask if you had questions. Sorry. That was just like one big long ramble. Any questions? don't see any chat messages. If I go back to the PowerPoint, we gave you the links to those checklists. We gave you a reminder on those due dates that we want you to be done with 1099s by January 14th so that we can have them printed by January 24th. Everybody distribute them by January 31st. The 1099 non-employee compensation has to be reported to the IRS by January 31st. The 1099 miscellaneous has to be reported by February 28th or March 31st if you're doing it electronically. But my thought is, upload one combined file for 1099 miscellaneous and NEC through the IRS fire site and be done by January 31st. When you go through the programs in Classic and Redesign, you do have the option to create your 1099 miscellaneous separate from your 1099 NEC. You can do that if you want. If so, if you're a Classic district, we will ask you that when you call to, ask us to do a backup and tell us it's time to print. We're going to say, did you create all your 1099s together or separate so that we know which files we need to pick up and print and submit. If you submit or create them separately in Redesign, just remember you have two files that you would need to upload to IRS Fire. So if there's a reason you have to create them separate, go ahead. I kind of think, once and done, just do both at the same time. But any questions on due dates, on checklists?
Question, Carrie, is there any reason why we couldn't do step 29, which is submit the 1099 information with step 15? Test file and everything. Is there a reason why we want to wait until everything's done to submit?
You do not have to wait. So the question is, can you do step 29, which is submit after doing step 15, which is the test? There is no reason to wait, except you want to make sure you go through the steps in 16, because as you go through these steps to create the test file, it's actually like a type of test. You want to just make sure you end up the real file uploading this official file where you say like, this is your original IRS submission. So I would do it after step 16 if you want to move it earlier. Yes, yes, no reason to wait, right? The only reason to wait right now is the IRS Fire site is down right now for maintenance and will not be up until the week of January 4th. But by the time you're ready to close, it should hopefully be back up. Any other questions?
And we should have said this in the payroll roundtable last week, and I forgot, but we're kind of celebrating today because it's the last classic checklist that we have to go through. So after we do our next set of migrations, we'll all just be on Redesign and we won't have to worry about doing two sets of documentation for everything.
And no more side-by-side checklists and bouncing back and forth and.
It's probably more of a celebration for us.
So other questions or anything else you've thought of to ask each other districts? So just, pull out your checklist and start looking at what you can do for pre-closing steps now. Check those steps off and you'll get through it. And if you need any help, call us. But that's all we have today. So thank you for joining us. Go ahead and stop the recording.